There's a moment in Cold War reconnaissance history that still shakes modern defense analysts. Not because of a weapon or a breakthrough in radar, but because of a camouflage method so deceptively simple that it continues to outperform expensive stealth coatings today. During the height of Soviet-NATO tension, both sides were desperate to disappear from aerial eyes. Satellites were new, spy planes were advancing, and radar nets were tightening across continents. Yet, tucked inside old Warsaw-packed field manuals was a strategy so effective that even today, during fieldcraft courses, instructors will pull new recruits aside and tell them that if everything else fails, this is the one trick that keeps you hidden. It's not about technology, color palettes, or high-tech materials. It's about how you manipulate contrast in natural environments using a method known as micro-pattern disruption. Long before adaptive camouflage and digital pixelation, Cold War engineers unlocked a principle that serious survivalists still swear by in the field. This guide breaks down that forgotten trick, why it still beats modern stealth in specific environments, and how you can use it with nothing more than paint, cloth, or natural materials in a real-world setting. The heart of this method lies in controlling how the human eye and optics interpret edges. During the 1950s and 60s, both Soviet and NATO field researchers realized that large blocks of color drew attention no matter how carefully the shade matched the environment. Even perfect color matching failed once lighting changed or the background shifted with movement. Micro-pattern disruption solved this by breaking the silhouette into dozens of irregular, high-frequency fragments that mimic the random noise of natural environments. Instead of relying on broad camouflage patterns, engineers turned to extremely fine patterns, thin streaks, tiny patches, speckles, and abrupt tonal shifts. When a reconnaissance aircraft scanned a vehicle or emplacement treated with these micro-patterns, the object lost its visual coherence. It no longer read as a single form. The result was a shape that dissolved into the terrain far more reliably than large patches of camouflage. One of the lesser-known research lines during the Cold War involved photographing mock enemy positions using high-altitude lenses. The tests repeatedly revealed a consistent fact-smooth surfaces, even when painted in advanced low-observable coatings, stood out under angled sunlight because light reflected uniformly. Micro-patterns broke that reflection so drastically that it blurred the entire object at long range. During a 1970s NATO field trial in Germany, two identical armoured carriers were hidden in woodland. One used standard camouflage, the other used extremely fine streaked micro-patterns devised by French and German researchers. Aerial teams consistently spotted the standard camo. The micro-pattern carrier went undetected in more than half the passes. The reason wasn't just better blending. The micro-patterns scattered light in multiple directions, creating a textured appearance similar to the forest floor. Even today, drone operators report that vehicles using small-scale disruptive patterns appear as noisy, low-contrast patches on video feeds, especially under filtered or diffused light. For survivalists, documentarians and historical reenactors, the technique can be recreated using simple steps. First, reduce all large patches of solid colour on gear or shelters. Even a tent or rucksack with modern camouflage often includes sections of smooth, unbroken colour that reflect more light than you would expect. The Cold War approach replaces these with thin vertical and diagonal strokes using muted earth tones. A small brush, a piece of sponge, or even a bundle of wrapped grass can apply the streaks. The key is variation. No streak should be the same width or run the same distance. When applying this method to a shelter or improvised hide, start with a base tone that matches the local soil or bark. Then apply fine streaks of 2 darker tones and 1 lighter tone. The end result is a high-frequency pattern that resists detection in unpredictable lighting. This method is also, surprisingly useful for covering equipment in the field. A rifle barrel wrapped in micro-pattern fabric blends more effectively against mixed backgrounds than a standard matte black cover, because the tiny patterning breaks the cylindrical silhouette. Photographers working in wildlife areas use a similar approach by applying extremely fine digital wrap patterns to lenses, which, suppress the hard edges that animals pick up instantly. The Cold War trick proves that even advanced digital camouflage today performs best when its pixel density is high and the patches are small. Exactly the principle field researchers discovered decades earlier. The biggest advantage is that this method does not rely on expensive materials. Modern stealth coatings work best at defeating radar and thermal imaging, but in the visible spectrum, especially through consumer-grade optics and drones, micro-pattern disruption still wins in mixed-terrain environments. In forests, brushland, rocky ground, and agricultural fields, nature produces extremely chaotic, irregular microtextures. Any man-made surface that lacks that micro-chaos becomes visible almost instantly. That is why Cold War snipers favoured local vegetation tied in small broken clusters rather than large swathes of foliage. The principle is the same. Small fragmentation breaks the familiar outline of a human form. The other advantage is adaptability. A modern uniform pattern is fixed. Micro-pattern disruption lets you tune your appearance to the environment. When moving through darker forests, increase the density of streaks. In open fields with pale soil, lighten the base tone and increase mid-tone streaks. The strategy remains timeless because it assumes nature is unpredictable and designs the camouflage to be equally unpredictable. This method works not because it hides you perfectly, but because it denies observers the one thing they rely on most: crisp edges. Every identification system, whether human vision or optical sensors, works by locking onto boundaries. When those boundaries dissolve under tiny fluctuations of tone and texture, the observer hesitates, delays, or misses the target entirely. That hesitation is what Cold War engineers optimized, and it remains relevant today for anyone who moves through the outdoors with a need for concealment, whether for filming, hunting, security training, or research. If this guide helped deepen your appreciation for Cold War fieldcraft, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this with fellow history and survival enthusiasts.